All right, and we are now joined by Denny Hamlin, driver of the number 11 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota. If you have a question for Denny, please raise your hand. We will get a wireless microphone to you. We will start with Jacob Seelman.
Jacob Seelman, Raceface Digital. Denny, you've won this race 3 times. You've been going for 4 for a couple years now, but what would it mean if you can get it this year in the wake of Cale's passing and to tie him for second on that list?
Yeah, I mean, I think with each win, it puts you in a different category, right? And certainly, some of the numbers that, Richard put up or Cale, it's really hard to duplicate in today's type of racing, where there's more cars on the lead lap, there's more cars that are in the front pack. So I think that, accomplishments like that it certainly puts you in a upper echelon of drivers that were legends in the sport. So it certainly would mean a lot.
When you win this race, obviously, as you mentioned, it puts you in an elite category, but does it take any pressure off when you come back here having won this race before? Or if anything, does it add more pressure trying to win it again?
Me personally, I would say it takes it off. I mean, it's, there's many, great drivers, certainly better than I am. They've never won this race, and, they deem it as a hole in their career. I think it's just a different type of racing now than what it used to be, for sure. It was a little bit more predictable back then because, the cars were kind of on edge, and you saw the great drivers, the great drafters always find their way in that position. It's just a little different in the next gen era, for sure. But yeah, having, multiple wins in this certainly takes the pressure off, and that there's just more to gain. There's not much to lose if you don't necessarily accomplish it this year.
We'll go next to Reed Spencer, and then to Chris Knight, and then to Steven Stump.
Reed Spencer with NASCAR Wire. As a follow-up to that, even though a 4th win here would put you in very elite company, does it take a backseat to a championship?
I mean, I'm not sure. It's, by the outside viewed as the pinnacle of our sport, right? And the championship is decided in one race, just like this race is deciding in one race. So I'm not really sure. It just kind of depends on whose perspective it might be. But certainly with the championship getting a smaller and smaller sample size, I view them very similarly.
Go next to Chris Knight.
ChrisKnightCatchFence.com. Denny, I don't think this applies to 2311, but there was a lot of chatter about it during the offseason. Just wanted to get your thoughts on it. The spotter, there was a lot of shuffling with the spotters and a lot of price wars bidding wars going on. And I was just wondering if you thought that their role has changed dynamically so much, and that do you feel like that it's something that is out of control, or do you think it's in balance for what they have to go through?
It's a good question. I think that, with everything being more and more common and similar with the equipment that you run, the technology that's shared, really the only differentiator you have is your people, right? So it's the drivers, it's the crew chiefs, and the spotters. Those are the ones that are on the radio on a race day. So anytime you can find an advantage in one of those positions, certainly you're gonna be in a much better spot. So I think that those guys are probably getting to a level where they were probably more fairly priced for the good ones.
We'll go to Steven and then to Dustin Long.
Steven Stump, Frenchers.com. Denny, for TRD this offseason, they've acquired Legacy Motor Club. In terms of strategy for the Daytona 500 and even the duels, how much of a difference does it make to have 8 or 9 Toyotas in the draft instead of 6?
I mean, it's yet to be seen. I touched on it a little bit this week, but really being able to have our own strategy, our pitting strategy, is beneficial. I'm just kind of torn on what exactly, how, working together is beneficial and this, that, and the other. I think it's probably in my best interest to get back to the basics, and that's doing what I feel is best to win the race for myself. While having teammates and all is great, I think those are certainly assets you can use to win races in certain situations. But I think that sometimes it's those who are the most selfish that make the moves for themselves are the ones that wins the race. I think that Ricky Stenhouse had no teammates last year. He won the race, and we've certainly had our fair share of moments where we had to pick between a move a teammate made versus a move someone else made, and I deemed that the other person made the right move. And so those lead into what I would argue is a more successful result for the 11 car. That still you want to help your teammates as much as you can, because you'll need those allies throughout the race and certainly during it. But I feel as though I need to personally go back to the style in which I had a few years ago, and we'll see what those results net.
And then with Legacy going up, you have Eric back at Toyota. You also have Jimmy coming on board as well, along with JHN from Xfinity. What has kind of changed behind the scenes at Toyota TRD? How close do you guys work together, involved in meetings or so on?
Yeah, I mean, all the teams are kind of intertwined in different areas for sure. We have an alliance with JGR and some technical stuff, some IP stuff. 2311 has an alliance with Legacy with some pit crew stuff and some other efficiencies. So I think that they're all kind of intertwined, and certainly you would argue kind of the Toyota teams intertwine with each other more than other manufacturers' teams intertwine with each other. So it certainly allows Toyota to zoom in, laser focus on the teams that they have, and I think that's resulted in some good benefits and results.
Go to Dustin Long.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. Denny went back and was looking back at some things from the past. You did a podcast with Nate Ryan 4 years ago, and there's a couple things here I want to read from you and get your perspective on now. You had said at the time in 2020, I still think personally that drivers should have an official voice. Now we have a voice, don't get me wrong. I think NASCAR definitely listens to us, but you have the RTA and they have a seat at the table when it comes to rules. They have a vote, and I think that matters. I think that the drivers should have that as well. You went on to say, look, there's different agreements coming up in the future, the TV rights agreement coming up in the future at that point, and you said the drivers need to be protected. 4 years later, where do you feel like the drivers are? You don't have that official seat at the table. Where do you feel like you guys stand? What if progress needs to be made, or what progress has been made?
I think I overestimated how much the RTA has to see at the table. Now that I'm part of it, I think that this whole thing's such a monopoly that you kind of get shunned out of different areas. I mean, they allow you in some things, but not in others. That it's very different. Now, I do think the drivers are in a better place now in the sense of they've got kind of an unofficial association. Again, it's not. It's only a seat at the table if you're allowed to be. It's not an official seat at the table. So, same with the race teams and their agreement with NASCAR. It's why there's butting heads there, right? So, there's only a seat if you're allowed a seat, and they're only going to allow a seat in a few certain situations. But I do think that there's avenues to the drivers, being more equitable in the sport in the future.
So, are the drivers in a better place then from 4 years ago, or just a different place?
A different place. I mean, it's very different because I've been kind of blessed with a really good situation my whole career. I didn't have to go through the ranks kind of like others and go through, big, salary crunches, over the course of my career, like many have gone through. But it's just a different place. I'm not sure if it's better or worse, but it's just a different place than it was. And I believe that it still could be a lot better for sure.
And one last thing. Obviously, you have a voice that is certainly heard throughout the sport. Ryan Blaney, as a champion, now has an opportunity where his voice is going to become more amplified. What do you hope, as an elder statesman or a veteran leader in sport in a way, hope to see out of Ryan and how he uses that voice over time now that he has that platform?
Yeah, just hope that he embraces it, right? I mean, he certainly has the opportunity to, be the next big star if he so chooses, right? You have to choose that life, right? And there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. But I think he's, certainly enough of a veteran, enough of a young guy that he's got a long runway ahead of him, that he has that voice and can be very powerful within our sport if he so chooses to do that. So I hope he does. I think he's going to be a huge asset to the sport. Well, after, Kevin's gone, I'll be gone in a few years, and Martin will be gone in a few years. Like, it's just, you've got to have that next group being willing to step up. And I think Ryan definitely could be that guy if he so chooses. But if not, there's others that maybe not have the stature of accomplishments that could potentially do it as well.
Shaz Prani from First Coast News, back here.
Yep.
I want to ask you about the playoffs. It's been 20 years since they've been implemented, and the Cup Series is the one thing that you're still vying for, right? So do you ever feel like it'd be better for it to be the winner chosen throughout, that's been the most consistent throughout the year, or do you really think these playoffs are a great way of finding who the best driver has really been all season?
Well, it'd be hard to argue the latter is correct, but I would say that I do like the playoffs. I really thought when they first implemented it, you had 10 drivers over 10 weeks. Like, it was the 10 best, and in order to be the 10 best, it was a really super elite group, and then you let those guys figure it out for the next 10 weeks, and every race had such big importance. Now there's a win in your end. You can just kind of, you can win and just go the next round. Doesn't matter about the other performances in the playoffs. So it's just different now. But I do like the playoffs. I do. I just wish, if I had to change it, it probably, I think there should be a championship round, not tie it down to one race where it could fit a potential manufacturer or a team or a driver. Make them work at some different types of racetracks to crown a champion. And in my opinion, I think it could be a bump in the ratings as well, because you have 3 championship races, right? So, and they all mean the same amount. No one's going to run off and win the championship between 3 guys after 2 races. You're still going to have that element, but it's probably a little more fair way to do it.
Yep, and you're one of the main faces on the Netflix series, as most of us has probably seen. So how important do you think is for the newer fans to get into NASCAR, to see these characters, to see these storylines, and to really see who you guys are behind the screen and behind these races that everyone sees?
Yeah, I thought that they did a really good job of kind of encapsulating like who I am as a person. I thought it was very fair to me personally. I thought that how the other drivers were portrayed was fair because it's how I see them as well. So, and I probably know them a little bit more than the casual race fan. So I thought it was all very fair. And you always worry about that stuff after, when you don't have any editing rights and you don't know how it's going to get produced or anything like that. But I thought it was a very good introduction for new fans, because they also were kind of teaching you kind of some 101 stuff of like, well, here's how it works, right? And I think that's the toughest part for our casual fan to latch on, is that they see the cars going around in circles. They just have no idea what gets them to that point. And so there's an even bigger, element that can be told about what makes this car maybe a little bit faster than the next, or this driver a little bit more talented than the other, or whatever it might be. So there's still lots of stories to be told amongst a bunch of drivers that, hopefully you'll get to see in the future.
All right, we're going to take 2 more questions. We're going to go to Mark Garrow, and then we're going to finish with Jim Utter.
Back here, Mark Carroll, PRN. Dan, just your thoughts on the start of the year having kind of back-to-back speedway races. I know Atlanta's not Daytona or Talladega, but it's in that genre, if you will, and just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me, the points counting stages and all that stuff start to matter for me next week. I think that you're willing to lay out on the line a little bit more here in Daytona because of the stakes of the Daytona 500, right? So I won't pay attention to any kind of stage points. Won't be going for any of that stuff. It's just about straight, how can I get to the 500-mile mark first, and what strategy I choose to take to get there. Sure, this race pays the same amount of points as Atlanta next week, but just from a mentality standpoint, for me, I will treat it differently, and how I choose to be aggressive in this race is different than what I will do at Atlanta, because while these two races won't give you any indication of who's going to be good when we go to Vegas or Martinsville or Richmond, or the tracks that really are the bread and butter of the regular season championship, you certainly don't want to get yourself in a hole over these next two races where you start to kind of panic and start chasing stage points, start chasing things because you think you're behind. There's many more innings of this game to be played.
So are you worried about potentially having two races in a row you could crash out?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a concern, but I know that I could get unlucky. I could end up causing a wreck that I get in. It's just part of what the racing that we know. I know that we're going to be good when we go to all those other tracks. Like, I know what our result is going to be if we just do what we've always done. But yeah, there's an element of chance in these first two that you just hope that you're on the good end of.
And we'll finish with Jim Mutter.
Jim Mutter, motorsport.com. Going back to your comments about your approach to the 500 this year, maybe taking a little bit more of a selfish approach. What we've heard a lot in the last couple of years is a lot of the manufacturers actually getting more involved. And I was wondering, I don't even know if you've had a chance to address this yet, but has your take on that going to conflict a little bit? Do you expect it to, with what you expect to hear from like Toyota?
I don't think so. I think we're all on the same page. If I had to guess, I think that when you look at kind of history of super speedway results, I think that Bubba Wallace has always been one that's been kind of contending, and I have as well on these types of tracks. But if we happen to be behind someone that doesn't have the history of that kind of success, but yet my result is dictated by the person that I have to push, I don't necessarily think that's a great strategy. So I think that while there's going to be plenty of opportunities for us to all work together, pitting, pushing each other by a competitor, manufacturer, or team, in the end, you have to be selfish to win these races, and certainly we realize that through results more than anything else. So I think all of us will probably be on the same page as far as that's concerned to do what we have to do to get a win. And if we win, then Toyota wins and Joe Gibbs Racing wins.
Thank you.
All right, Denny, thank you, and
Thanks.
good luck this weekend.